Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manicherian, former NFL scout and now of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, we've got our producer, Justin Stein, with us, and today we have a special guest, Nick Underhill. Nick used to cover the Saints for the New Orleans Advocate, was one of our earliest Data Hub Pro subscribers here at SIS. He spent a year covering Aaron's Patriots for The Athletic, and now he's back in New Orleans with a new venture. He has started the Saints coverage website, neworleans.football. Nick, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the show to talk all things Saints.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we get to the fun stuff, and we usually try to stay out of these issues, but after we'd already planned to have you on, a few Saints have been in the news lately. Sean Payton's been very vocally supportive of Black Lives Matter. Drew Brees made a statement that was focused on respecting the flag. And some of Brees' teammates, notably Malcolm Jenkins, told him that he was part of the problem. At one point, Coach Payton fired back at Shooter McGavin on Twitter, so things got really crazy. And then as it's gone overnight into today, I know you have some updates on it. So let's start with, what's your understanding of what's transpired here?
Yeah, look, I like to stay out of this stuff too. I'd rather just talk about how Demario Davis covers tight ends instead of, his thoughts on these matters. It's terrible that this stuff's going on in the country, and, it's intersected in a big way with the Saints. Talking to players last night, there's a lot of hurt feelings, and people are upset with what Brees said. I don't think anybody's surprised or mad at him for his views on the protest and his strong feelings towards the anthem and the flag. It was the way he spoke kind of minimized all the other issues and didn't really allow for opposing viewpoints. And there's a way that he can stand with his hand over his heart at full attention for the anthem. And the guy next to him, if he wants to kneel, he can kneel and, do what he wants to do during the anthem. And, I think his teammates want to have a atmosphere where there can be a marriage of these two ideals. And this very prominent person isn't speaking out and trying to set back the things they're fighting for and not understanding what they're speaking about. And like you said, it got pretty crazy yesterday on Twitter with players speaking out. You have a second-year player, fourth-round pick, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, so upset that he's speaking out on superstar future Hall of Fame quarterback and basically saying, F you in the video. Malcolm Jenkins, told him to shut the F up in his video. It is, you're talking about a team with probably arguably one of the best rosters, top 2 or 3 at least. They've been known for their great locker room culture. And now all of a sudden, I think the biggest issue for this team is finding a way for them to, I don't know if they can get to a point where they like each other, but you at least got to get to a point where the guys on the offensive line want to block for Drew and they aren't hating him, and they got to be able to be okay being in the same room. And, he put out his statement, and that's a good first step, him saying that he condemns racism.
Yeah.
Yes. And look, for him, that's not easy. He is I think his number one personality trait is his stubbornness, and he digs in on issues. And for him to step back, that's something. But I think, of course the statement's going to come. It's going to be his actions moving forward. And he's going to have to show people that, he's truly not this person that he presented himself as on Wednesday.
He said in his statement that he wants to listen going forward. I think he's going to have to listen. He's going to have to listen to teammates who disagreed with him on this. And I've got to think it's more about the fact that he stated things publicly. It's not like there's a lack of right-wingers in NFL locker room. It's just that I think everybody sort of sublimates their political views and tries not to make a big deal out of them so that they don't get into fights like this. And by saying something about it publicly, it created the firestorm.
He should have expected it, though, because he was one of the people that spoke out strongest when Kaepernick first started. He should have known it was coming. One thing that I talked to a lot of people yesterday, and one of the things that I was able to gather is that Drew has experienced PR people around him that handle, his every move. But when it comes time to prep for interviews, Drew waves that stuff off, and he just goes out and he does Drew. And look, he's built a empire and around himself outside of football, being Mr. Family Man, the Vicks guy, the Wrangler guy, the Microsoft guy, Pepsi. And Drew being Drew usually works. This time he should have listened and been prepared. And he could have said his whole thing. Hey, the anthem means this to me. My grandfather fought in this war. This is why I care about it. And I will always stand for the anthem. But I also understand why everybody else has these viewpoints. And, you know, when I said the stuff about Kaepernick before, you know, I've learned in this time that I should have listened and heard what I don't know and seen a broader viewpoint. And I think all of us as Americans can do that. Very simple answer. You just got to have that second half of it. But he stopped short. And, you know, I think that's the issue. And I think he realizes it. I think he's going to have to humble himself. Like you said, Aaron, he's going to have to listen to what everybody has to say. And it's, you know, treated the right way, it's possibly a way for people to grow from it. Treated the right way, I think people that maybe are closed off to things can see what Drew just went through, and maybe hopefully they look at themselves now and say, hey, okay, like if he can see this, yeah, maybe I was wrong. But I mean, it just depends how everybody approaches it. And, you know, most of it's going to be on Drew. I mean, he's going to have to open up his heart and his mind to opposing viewpoints.
So, Nick, I'm wondering what it's like in New Orleans today. You know, everybody's had the night to sleep on it. There's been some apologies. What do you get from fans' reactions, people around the city, your contacts with the team?
I think everybody's still in shock. I can't remember ever seeing anything like yesterday. A guy really, the NFL's all-time leading passer, you know, like I said, he's kind of built this image of like the all-American family man. And it was like in the matter of a couple of hours, like everything, he lost his standing of respect in the world of sports. He lost his standing of respect in society. You know, he's someone that, you know, he was going to the NBC booth next year. Maybe he still is, but it's like, you know, that's just, he's marketed himself so well. And I don't think anybody's overly shocked. Again, like this has been he was so strong back in, 2017, you know, in his stance on it. But I think it's more surprising just the misstep and not knowing how to handle it, and that his viewpoint hadn't changed at all. Like all this stuff is going on, and it's just kind of like,
no, but the median viewpoint of the public has changed over the last couple of years. I think he failed to read the room.
That's exactly it. And like he sought out an interview with Yahoo Finance. Like, I don't know, him going out there and saying it was just a really big misstep. But yeah, it's a feeling of shock. People on the team are still upset. Like he put out the statement, but I think it's kind of like, you know, still, okay, you were going to do this. The crafted statement was always coming. Now, what do you do next? They have a team meeting, I think, right now as we're talking. So, you know, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. You know, I expect him to be smart enough to know that, to read the room now. I mean, I think he was shocked overnight by the backlash. He's not somebody that's generally ever in a situation where he's unliked, and I think he strives to be the likable person. So, I mean, it's a lot. It's a shocking situation. You know, I think there's optimism with the coaching staff that they can use it and hopefully foster an environment where something positive comes out of it. And I think that's a long shot, but if everything goes perfectly to the Disney version of how the story goes, maybe you come out of this singing Kumbaya and your team's stronger than ever. I doubt they get there, but I do think that they'll be able to get to a place where they coexist. Breeze plays the season, he goes to NBC next year, and they'll still be a good team. But it's a challenge. I mean, look, yesterday, right before all this happened, I did an interview and somebody asked me about Clowney, and I'm like, oh, well, everything falls out and he has to settle for a team. Why wouldn't he want to go to the Saints? They have this awesome locker room culture. There's the videos, they're going to win. And then it's like 2 hours later, it's just in shambles. So it's some wreckage to sort through.
It's interesting. I wonder if, in a way, not to be kumbaya, everything's going to be perfect, but maybe this did happen to the best team and one of the best people this could have happened to, because Drew Brees does have a long history. He's very respected. He's done, like he said, actions. He has a lot of positive actions that he's put out there. He got exposed to just a huge blind spot of his. Like, obviously, he was not reading the room, and obviously, he was blind to the part of this that he really missed here. So I know a lot of white people would take that and really fight back about it. But the fact that he has apologized, the fact that this culture does exist, the fact that he's had a relationship with Malcolm Jenkins for 10 plus years, and they have the sort of relationship where maybe one person can say F you to the other one and come back from it. Just like in the NBA, when coronavirus got exposed to all of us because we saw Rudy Gobert, what happened there. And it's like the craziest way to get a wake-up call. Maybe this was that crazy wake-up call that for all of the marching and protesting, for the white people that still didn't understand, maybe there's a group that comes along with Drew Brees into a level of understanding of this that they didn't have.
There is that silver lining. It's tough for him, and he had to take a big fall. But I think maybe for people that aren't super dug in on one side and maybe didn't understand some of the divide, like this is the thing that maybe breaks through and does reach them. I think that is going to happen. I think there's probably people sitting at home right now being like, oh, I get it now. I didn't understand before, but now I see. And I don't know how many of them there are, but if there's even a few, I mean, that it's a weird thing that, this bad thing happened to him and this team, but maybe, it helps some segment of society go forward. I don't know. I mean, you got to hope at least that that's the outcome. It's bad that it happened like this, but he is kind of one of that, especially here in Louisiana. I mean, he's the guy that people pay attention to, and maybe some of that cuts through. It's sort of like when Sean Payton got coronavirus, everybody saw it on Bourbon Street. Sean gets it, and it's like, oh, like, yeah, we should be at home. So maybe this is that moment here where at least conversations can start and stem from it. I mean, maybe there is that silver lining.
I hope so. All right. Well, let's transition our conversation over to the field. But before we get really to the Saints on the field, I want to circle back to New Orleans football. As I mentioned in the intro, I became a fan of yours in the early days of the Data Hub when you were using our stats put together with reporting and film analysis to create just some of the best football coverage out there. So first of all, for people that aren't as acquainted with you, how do you describe your style as a football writer, or what do you look to accomplish, when you set out?
I guess the thing I try to do is I try to treat my job as if I go to work every day and like all these people are my teachers. Like I get to ask Sean Payton these questions. I get to ask, all the players questions, and I just watch a lot of football and I develop curiosities. Hey, why is this happening? Why is that happening? I try to go out, I try to learn, and I bring it back and I try to distill it and teach people. The Sports Info Solution stuff often makes that job a lot easier. Before you guys, I would spend, oh my God, there were times where I would spend a week just, looking up some minute thing, and you got to watch every snap to find out how many blown blocks somebody has throughout a season, because you need that detail in a story to kind of stem from it. But people are reading right by it and they don't know that I just spent, 30 hours watching all this tape of Andrews Pete to say that, so I can go to your site and just pull it up and put it in there. And, I can spend more time building a story around that. But, that's the stuff I like to do. I'm not a big profile writer, features or things like that. It's just, I want to learn and use these resources around me, to find out new things and develop a deeper understanding of the game. And I hope that comes out in the writing.
As well said. It's for people that are really curious about learning more about football. I think it's a great fit there. And then you spent a year in New England. So I wanted to ask you about that. So what are some of the key differences that you noticed from going to the Saints to the Patriots, whether it be that the way that the teams that they're run or the way that they're covered or anywhere in between?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's they both come from the Parcells tree. So there are some similarities there, but I think it kind of stops at an ideology, and the way they're actually run, I think is drastically different. From a reporting aspect, one of the reasons that, I went up there and I came back, it was frustrating. It was a frustrating place to be, because the way I try to approach the job, like you go in and it's just, you're stonewalled on like the most stupid stuff. Like you can't ask anybody anything. You aren't learning a whole lot. So it felt like, they win a lot. So I'm not criticizing the way they do things works. And it's, definitely the right way to do it because they win all these games. But for my aspect, it was a tough place to be, and it just didn't feel very rewarding. The work I was doing, I just wasn't happy doing it. My job became work before it wasn't work. So for me, I had to change that. But the way they run, I mean, the locker rooms are completely different. The way I describe it, the Patriots are a very corporate place, and like the Saints is more like family business, and it's just a different atmosphere to be in. And I think the players feel that too. You go to New England, and it's very bottom line, and it is everywhere, but it's harsh there. It's a much more harsh place. It's a much more harsh environment. And, if you can survive in it, people thrive. The way they manage the cap is ridiculously different. It's just every aspect top to bottom. The Saints do a mafia accounting, basically. It's everybody has fake years. There's money hiding everywhere. The Patriots are clean ledgers. It's just, everything about it. I think you start Parcells, they have some of the same ideas. Practices look the same, but after that, I think it's vastly different.
That's fascinating. Aaron, what's your reaction to that?
I was going to say, I mean, the funny thing is the reaction to everything the Patriots do tends to be, well, they're winning so much, it must work. But I do think it's fair to say about some of the things they do, maybe this isn't part of the winning. Like, I mean, I think it's fair to say that being total dicks to the press may not be part of the winning. Like, that may be just something that they do that is a correlation with the winning, but not a cause of the winning.
Well, look, I'll say this, Aaron, not to interrupt, but I mean, the stuff with the press starting right away, like the way they treat us day to day, I think doing that would stem to not having your quarterback go on Yahoo Finance and say something crazy that divides the locker room.
Agreed. And I also think it may just go all the way back to Cleveland. It may just go back to the really bad relationship Belichick had with the press in Cleveland. And he may have said to himself when he came to New England, I need to do everything in my power to not let the press get in the way of me winning ball games. And so he went to this sort of extreme with the idea that it would help them win games in mind. But you are not the first reporter that I've talked to who's come from another team who says that covering the Patriots is unbelievably difficult.
It's a hard team to criticize. And look, I spent a year, like every time you say anything about them, it's just like, oh, well, they win. And it's like, yeah, they do. So I guess like all this stuff, I think there is, like I said, some of it that helps to where you don't have these things that happen where it brings a ton of press in and everybody's asking questions. Like they silenced the Tebow thing, and there's nobody else in the world that could have been able, nobody could have done that. They brought in Antonio Brown for the 48 hours he was there or whatever. There was 10 minutes where it was like a circus, and then it was just like this guy was there and it was going to work. And I just don't think culture for years of just this stifling atmosphere where things happen and everybody moves on.
Yeah, I'm going to press pause before I make any comparisons to politics based on the media relationships of different teams around the league. But okay, so it sounds like it was a not a great place to work. I can see why Tom Brady was so excited to go to Tampa Bay. And I see why you wanted to come back to New Orleans. So coming back, neworleans.football, what's your vision for the website?
I just want to be able to do the stuff I do, build an audience, have them support it, and that's it. Like, don't waste time on stuff that doesn't matter. There's a lot of that in this industry. You have to put stuff out to sell subscriptions and everything, but I think I have a strong enough base here that I can just really do the core work, and you don't have to go out and fish for anything. And it doesn't matter, if I meet the numbers where I can pay my rent and get my groceries, I can just do it exactly the way I want to do it. And our business too, I mean, there's just so much uncertainty with, I don't have to worry if this works. And look, we're at a really good point already after 3.5 months, but if this works, I don't have to worry about somebody buying a newspaper or somebody figuring out a viable way to sell the lifestyle section or advertisements or anything like that. And I don't have to worry about, somebody pleasing their investors and meeting numbers on that side of it. And with the coronavirus too, I mean, the newspaper industry, I don't think we've seen the effect on it yet. Businesses are going to reopen. Are they going to buy subscriptions? There's just so much uncertainty that, looking out and being a part of some different business models, it just felt like this was something that, I had thought about it for a while. And it's just like, if I can build an audience around myself, I can do this the way I want and I don't have to worry about anything. And, I just think at this time it's worth a shot. And if it works, I figured it out for myself and I don't have to worry about somebody else figuring out their vision. And that's worth the risk for me.
Awesome. I love it. Well, let's dive in now and let's get back to the Saints. Aaron, you had wanted to start off. You were going through strategic tendencies for the Football Outsiders Almanac, and I know you had some questions lined up for Nick. What's first on your list?
Well, I just thought it was interesting to look at some of the stuff. First of all, this is a good team to focus on because this is the number one team in our projections for next year. Obviously, there's no variable in the projections for the quarterback pisses everybody off, but let's put that aside for a moment. This team has a ton of talent on both sides of the ball. I'll tell you one of the interesting things that I saw when I was looking through all of the strategic tendency stuff is the fact that the Saints running backs, you wouldn't think this given Sean Payton's ability to manipulate defenses, but they actually ran against heavy boxes of 8 or more, 43% of runs, which is second in the league behind Tennessee. Now, it's interesting that they were actually better on those runs than they were on other runs, but I don't know how permanent that is. It's interesting that they don't really, it's the opposite of the Rams. They don't really use their personnel to manipulate themselves into good running situations like the Rams or the Cardinals do. They sort of go heavy a lot, and then, they just run against the heavy boxes anyway.
Yeah, I think they were like one of 5 teams that were under 50% of 11 personnel last year. So that runs a little bit counter to, I think, the vision that a lot of people have for the Saints. But I think over the last 3 years, since 2017, they have worked to kind of condense that offense a little bit. And I think that's to hide some of the stuff with Breeze, his arm strength going down. There's a lot of stuff. If they've been running the same stuff forever. You watch a 2009 game and there's, a play with a go route. Now they have what they call a giant route, which is like, a 16-yard crossing route down the field to kind of hide some of that. But with the running backs, I think a lot of that had to do with them hating their guards, and they weren't getting out in space. And they're a zone run team. But, if Larry Warford, he showed up last year and he was extremely out of shape to start the season. He had surgery on his knee late, and it was a source of contention the whole year. I guess it was kind of from what I've heard, an uncomfortable atmosphere in the locker room with just kind of the way they were going at him the whole year. And
wow,
he was like one of the 3 slowest guards in the NFL. And then you add in an injury and you're his own team, and you see the effect on their screen game since 2017. Like, that was one of their strengths. And then the last 2 years, it's gone down. Andrews Pete was hurt last year. So I think there was a lot of hiding in some of the stuff they were doing with their running game. And I do think that some of that's going to change. Ideally, they'd like to get Eric McCoy. I think he's, 40 time isn't the greatest measure, but he's a 4.89 guy, like a guard. I looked at it. I think he would be the second fastest guard in the NFL. So I think that's going to help them do more stuff in space. They got the rookie Cesar Ruiz. If he can pick up, the snap count, the cadence, all that stuff, which I think is going to be a significant challenge without OTAs and mini camp. You got to be on the field to do that stuff. There's only so much you can do through a Zoom. But if he can pick that up and they can put McCoy at guard, I think you'll see some of that stuff change a little bit. Like, again, going back to 17, Alvin, that was basically everything he did was 11 personnel, and he dominated against it. And I just think that it was a lot of hiding last year. The Warford thing was a surprise the most, but I think, to the locker room, like, he was gone already. He was a dead man walking all last year. And, I do think getting him out of there and getting Pete healthy will possibly change the way they do some things.
Yeah, it's funny the way you look at the Saints depth chart going into the draft, and you'd say, okay, this isn't a need position. Why would they ever draft here? But if you know that inside the locker room, what you're talking about, the way the feelings were about Warford, it makes a whole lot more sense. Now, you're saying the vision is McCoy kicks over to guard. So the question of being whether Ruiz can pick up all of the mental aspect of center. I wonder if maybe they wouldn't keep some of that responsibility with the guard. I don't see a reason why you can't say, even if McCoy is playing right guard, he can be making the calls, he can be doing the interactions as far as the mic goes, and just worrying about actually the snapping of the football isn't as big a deal. I think in a perfect world, it's your center that controls it. But let's be real, a first and a second-year player, Drew is controlling everything up there.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, I think you can get away with things at those positions.
Yeah, the thing is, though, like, last year, Dan Rochar was just talking about this recently, like this morning, actually. Like, there were times last year in games, even during the season, McCoy was transitioning into that. And Drew does a lot of things, and he likes to change things up. And for a rookie player, that can be difficult. And there were some plays where he would snap the ball, and Teron Armstead to his left would already be a yard and a half down the field before the ball was in Drew's hands. So, and he had the whole offseason, and he went through all that stuff. So I think it's just, they got to get him out there and make sure he's comfortable. One of the things about Ruiz is that, his mental ability and processing is something people rave about. His coach at Michigan has commented that, like, he was 98% perfect throughout his career, like, on mental errors. And that's one of the things you hear about him. So I think possibly he can do it, but for a young guy coming in, not having whatever it is, the 12 practices and the OTAs and minicamp, that's a setback. And you aren't starting out with, okay, I'm doing this on the field, and this is what I don't know. So this is what I need to work on from June until July, and I get back. So it might set it back a little bit. But yeah, I mean, Drew's taking a significant amount of the pressure off. It's probably one of the easier places to play center in the NFL, just, because he does do all that stuff himself. But, there is a transition and a comfort period that he's going to have to figure out.
For sure. That's a good transition. It might be kind of a similar question. The Saints were 28th in play action rate, the amount that they used it last year, but first in play action effectiveness in 2019. So the first thing I thought when I read that is they must be in shotgun a lot, which explains the low usage. But the truth is, just like you were saying, they don't use much 11 as you'd think. They were 25th in the NFL in terms of shotgun usage. So they're playing a whole lot more football in straight dropbacks from under center than most of our research that we do, Aaron's research that he does, would seem to recommend. So based on your interactions with Coach Payton, Carmichael, Rochar, do you get the sense that they feel like there's still meat on the bone in how they can be more progressive in terms of those things like play action and shotgun usage? Or is the thought process that the low usage of some of the most efficient concepts is actually what helps ensure that they get the best bang for the buck when they actually use them? So this is a long-winded way of me saying, which direction do you see the offense going in terms of these sorts of strategic questions?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by this one, and I'm confused by it because they're usually a pretty smart team, and they have a good analytics department. And just seeing these numbers, I was just like, "What? This doesn't make sense." And there's another one coming up too that we'll talk about that when it gets there. But there are some things that are definitely they don't make a lot of sense when you try to marry it with sound logic and numbers and stats. And if you don't like your guards, you think you would be more shotgun heavy too. So you get that extra, 0.2 seconds or whatever it might buy you. I don't know. I mean, this one's extremely confusing to me. And I think if they do get their running game going a little bit better, that you can do more off of it. And I think bringing in Emmanuel Sanders, and you're going to be maybe a little bit more pass heavy than you were in previous seasons, and it will spread out a little bit. But on the other hand, they're doing some things that kind of run counter to common logic. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see the adjustment.
I wonder how much of it has to do with not trusting the other wide receivers as much, to not doing as much downfield with other wide receivers. And obviously, the hope is that changes with Emmanuel Sanders as the number 2 this year. And I'd also love to see real development from Traquan Smith. He was a guy who did really well in our playmaker score coming into the league. And when he went to the Saints, we were like, oh, this is just a really great marriage of player and scheme. But he just hasn't done that much in the 2 years that he's been with the Saints.
I don't know if he's ever really going to pick it up. Maybe going to wide receiver 3 helps him, and you can limit it to, you do this handful of things and you don't have to worry too much. There's just a lot there. He's struggled with the splits, and I don't think he's ever fully understood like where he's even supposed to be on the field. And he's talked about, I couldn't believe he told me this one day, but he was like, they yell at me all the time and I'm not in the right place. And sometimes I'll just pick up my foot and put it back down and see if they correct me and if I'm still not there. So I just think there's mental aspects of the position
That's honesty.
You appreciate it. It's one of those things you're not going to hear at the Patriots. I think maybe taking some off his plate maybe helps him. I think he can be a viable third wide receiver, but it's definitely a do or die season for him. And I do wonder how many snaps he's going to get. They like this guy, Emanuel Butler. He was a UDFA last year, and they kind of they thought about bringing him up, but they kept him hidden on the practice squad because they didn't want to risk losing him if they had to send him back down. So they like his potential. And I think Deontay Harris is also going to get some looks, at least, in those plays where it's just, go run a go route. He's 5'6", so I don't know how many snaps he's actually going to get altogether, but they like his playmaking ability, and I think they're going to find the way to get the ball in his hands. So I don't know if it's ever going to happen for Traquan, but maybe his production per snap goes up a little bit, and they find a way to utilize it. But yeah, I mean, I think he's been probably I think it's fair to say at this point a significant disappointment for what they had, because
it's hard to call him a bust because he was a 4th rounder. So what he's done is sort of commensurate with being a 4th rounder. I just expected more from him than that.
Was he in the 4th round? I thought it was a second.
He was a third. Sorry, he was a third.
Third. Okay. Well, we'll split the difference.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there was a lot on Mike last year. And one of the crazy things is I don't have it right in front of me, but I wrote it recently. I think if you take away like his top 6 routes, the yardage on it, like he still would have led the Saints in receiving production. Like that's how bad it was last year.
Yeah,
so
it was unbelievably one-sided.
You could make a weird argument that they didn't even really need to do anything because it worked and they won all those games and made the playoffs. It takes some off, but like he was so productive that it's a problem. But it's like if they didn't draft somebody or sign somebody, you almost could justify trying to get by with what they had, and it probably still would have worked. But at some point, you got to diversify and change up your offense a little bit. Dallas is really the only team that's like really locked him out 2 years ago during the regular season. They kind of showed how to take him away, and I think that hurt him later in the year. Then Breeze also got injured, but yeah, definitely you got to have somewhere else to go. I think Jared Cook's going to help a lot with that too. His play after settling into the offense was really good, and I think he's going to take another step next year. Just earlier in the year they were not on the same page. He's dropping passes. Some of the route stuff, ball's going down the field, he's cutting the other way. So I think him being settled in, Sanders, Mike, I think the offense is really going to take the next step. And getting Alvin healthy, I think is going to open things up a lot more too. But he's got to show that he can take those hits and keep going. He hasn't done it since his rookie year, but the upside on the offense is really high.
So one last thought that I had, and it relates to what we were talking about earlier with the guard and center maybe being an easier position to play with the Saints and having Drew Brees right there with you. That might be part of what Traquan Smith, Jared Cook kind of the transition for them into the office, I think, is a little bit more difficult, just as it's easier for players that are playing kind of inside the box there right along with Breeze. Anyway, let's keep it moving right along, though, and let's talk about another piece of the offense, Taysom Hill. One thing we talked about a little bit, but we didn't get to, is the Saints led the NFL in expected points added per play out of 12 personnel. They were the most efficient team in the NFL out of 12 personnel. And I think this must have a lot to do with Taysom Hill and kind of he and a running back combining to make that 12 personnel package, and a lot of what made it so efficient for them. So I'm curious, what do you make of the vision for him as a player in 2020 and then into the future? There's the talk about him really potentially being the quarterback of the future. What do you make of it?
Are we in a safe Taysom place, or are you guys Taysom haters? I know it's kind of like
we're in a safe place here, I think.
He seems to get people fired up. Like just the mere mention of his name is like a lightning rod. Look, I think the vision for him going forward is what it was in the Minnesota game. I think you're going to see less of him on special teams this year and kind of a transition more into, a heavier offensive weapon. And I think you're going to see more of Taysom going forward. The Saints are of the belief that he was among the best players on the field in that playoff game against Minnesota. And they want to find a way to get him throwing more passes, getting the ball in his hands more, and just more of what he's doing. And I think you also saw last year growth as a route runner from, where he started to where he ended. And he was adding more and more as the season went along. And while there isn't a ton of work being done on that, like he's not training with the receivers coach or anything like that. He's training in the offseason with the throwing coach as if he's going to be a quarterback. But, his understanding of offenses and how he fits into it and the growth he's making as a quarterback, he's pointed out that that's helped him as a receiver and being able to run more detailed routes and to just maybe grow in that role a little bit. Going forward, they really do believe that he can be a quarterback going forward. The Steve Young stuff, every time you watch a game, the announcer saying, oh, they see him as Steve Young, and every broadcast crew says that. That's coming out of Sean Payton's mouth in a production meeting, and he actually believes that he has the potential to do that. Now, is he sold all the way in to where he's not betting on anything else? No, I mean, they brought in Jameis Winston for a reason, to see if they can fix him and maximize that upside. And I think if you can eliminate Jameis's mistakes, I think that you would see them re-sign him and let a real competition play out, because the upside in other areas is a little bit higher. But Sean does see the future of the league with mobile quarterbacks. And I think they could do things with Taysom similar to what's happening in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. Some of his accuracy is spotty, but I think they could scheme open throws, and his creativity with him. I think they see a lot of things that they can do. And I think you go to the offensive line, this offensive line they've built is becoming more athletic. And you look down the road and you got a quarterback who can extend plays and get outside of the pocket. You want people that can get out into space and lay down blocks, as opposed to, somebody that's a little bit more stationary like Larry Warford.
I think the biggest problem is that he's 30. I mean, that's the biggest problem with thinking of him as a quarterback prospect, is that he's 30. That's Taysom Hill hater as an offensive weapon. He's definitely got value. Receiver or tight end, or I guess we're going with tight end at this point, seems to be the conventional wisdom. As far as being a quarterback prospect, he is what he is. You don't really, it's very rare to learn new stuff and suddenly get much better after 30. So I feel like his limit is what he's doing now, and what he's doing now is valuable.
It's tough. I can go both ways on it. If you look at him at BYU, and it was abysmal, like the throwing stuff. Like I don't even know how you can watch that and see him as a quarterback. But then you watch, and it's the preseason, but are the defenses you're seeing in the preseason not much different from who BYU's playing? It's not super high level stuff, but you can see things like how he's going through his reads, his pocket presence, some of the accuracy. He's never going to be high level accurate where you're putting the ball on the right shoulder so the guy can turn up the field and maximize his yards after catch. But, his functional accuracy has gotten a lot better than it was at BYU. There aren't passes into the flat sailing 7 yards over somebody's head. They're catchable even if it's on the thigh. It's gotten a little bit better. But I do think that you need a lot of help, and that you'd have to scheme a lot of stuff open for him. And again, that's why Jameis is there, because if you can fix that, you can run your offense as it is and still do it. And the upside's a lot higher, but I do think that they believe they can make him into a weapon. But I got to see it. They see the stuff in practice a little bit more. I think one of the advantages for him is that Breeze doesn't throw on Wednesdays, so he is getting a lot of reps every week, as opposed to some other places where you're maybe splitting that up. So he's practicing to be the starter. So it's going to be 2 days for both these guys to get a lot of work. Whereas in a normal 2-3 quarterback system, somebody's watching. So they're going to get a good evaluation on both. And I think it's good that there's this benchmark of, all right, you got to beat out Jameis if you want to be the guy. And I think that's, high level competition for him. It's probably a better source of competition really than even Teddy Bridgewater. So if he earns the job, I'm going to give him the benefit of doubt. But I mean, I am a doubter myself. 2 years ago in camp, the first year that, he came in midseason, his first camp here, he was under 50% passing in team drills that summer. And, training camp stats being what they are, who cares? But when they're bad, like, I think it says something. But, I do think that he's grown since then. And you see him operating some of their core passing concepts in the preseason. So there are traits that are improving. It's just how much can he actually do?
Yeah, one thing that you can't deny is that they've invested in him now, and they've also drafted a potential backup for him, somebody that can fit that same enigma position that he plays for them. That's kind of hard to pin down. So certainly he's in the plans for the position to grow. And if Coach Payton's saying he's the quarterback, even if he's 30, when you look at the aging curves, at least with quarterbacks, that's one position where being 30 is not that different from being 35, at least recently in the NFL.
Yeah, but I don't think you're learning at that point. I think it's about the decline is less than other positions, but
right.
I think you're getting better in your early 30s for the most part.
It's harder to believe. Aaron, on the strategic tendencies front, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask Nick?
Well, I just wanted to point out something cool about the Saints. I think people don't realize how good their defense is. One of the things about their defense was that it was excellent at tackling last year. I was really surprised going through the numbers that they were third in the league with just 94 broken tackles, trailing only New England and Minnesota. I think one of the reasons why the Saints are such a good Super Bowl contender is that they do have a strong defense to go with that offense. They're strong on both sides of the ball.
They place a priority on that too. Like PJ Williams is somebody that probably isn't great in coverage, but you put him in the slot and he's a great run defender. I think taking Von Bell out, I'll be interested to see if that changes their tackling numbers next year, because he was also a really good run defender and somebody that kind of played a key role in that. I don't know how Malcolm Jenkins compares. I think Malcolm will improve them in coverage, but I could see their run defense taking a little bit of a step back. As far as tackling, like if Marcus Williams just makes the key tackles in key moments, that would go a long way for them too. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely something that they place a priority on, and it could slip a little, but I think they should still be pretty good there.
Right, probably a little bit of a regression to the mean, but a good defensive tackling team, a good run defense team, and I think a team that we all think of as being a real man-heavy coverage team. They allowed a negative expected points added when they played man last year and a positive expected points added out of zone. And yet I was shocked to look in the Football Rookie Handbook on the Saints team page to find that they played zone coverage almost twice as often as they played man last year. So I'm curious to hear what your reaction to that is, Nick, and what you think we can expect from the secondary going forward.
Yeah, this is the other thing that was bizarre to me. I don't understand why they're doing this, especially like Marshawn Lattimore's really, really good in man coverage, and he's mediocre in zone. And Eli Apple's, a decent man coverage guy, grading him against himself. It doesn't make a lot of sense with the personnel they had. And they probably played more two deep safety stuff than I think made a lot of sense for them, considering, Von Bell's not a good coverage player. And his only interception in his career was literally on a pass where somebody knocked the ball directly into his hands. Like, he's not a ball hawking guy. So I don't get it. I mean, I know Dennis Allen's, hallmark is disguise, and that probably plays into some of the disparity. And maybe there's a little bit of a longer game. We're going to show them this to work off of this, but like your personnel dictates man coverage. And I think going forward, they got to get back to that. But if it's him and Janoris Jenkins, Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to play a whole lot of zone stuff. You got Marcus Williams, who has incredible range. So, let him be a ball hawk out there. I don't get it. Like this doesn't make any sense to me at all. And it runs counter to, what their team, at least to me, appears built to do.
You got to think with Malcolm, they go back to a lot more single high and utilize his ability in man. Is that the direction you see them going?
I would hope so, but the direction last year doesn't make a lot of sense. So, I'm not going to put it out there and say this is what they're going to do. Logically looking at it, it seems like they're built to play man coverage, and they put these pieces together to do it. They got to go do it now. It's weird to me, to see the zone versus man numbers, and and just the disparity between the success and failures. It just doesn't make sense that they're doing it this way.
And yet, like a lot of the stuff we've brought up, like logically, we feel like the Saints should be playing a different way, and yet it works.
It works. Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you to all of our listeners. You are the reason that we were able to do this. So thank you for all your support. Please continue to like, share, review, and be sure to check out SIS film breakdowns on YouTube. Those are led by our top 2 video scouts on the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, Nathan Cooper and John Todd. You can catch that on YouTube. Sports Info Solutions is also now recruiting 2020 football video scouts. If you're interested in applying, head to the careers section of our website, sportsinfosolutions.com. We are expecting the season to go off without a hitch, and we are recruiting like we're on the regular timeline as of right now. So check that out. Eventually, we're all going to be able to leave our houses, hopefully, and watch some football. The Football Outsiders Almanac, you heard us reference it today during the show, some of the strategic tendencies. That will be out in July. Aaron is working fast and furiously on that. And, of course, you can find Nick Underhill's Saints coverage at neworleans.football. Nick, anything else you want to plug here?
No, I'm just hoping that we get those football games, man. I'm just counting the days. Football coaches are going back tomorrow, so things are heading the right direction. But, yeah, let's just try to stay home if you can so we get to watch, Tom Brady and Drew Brees play week 1.
And if you're not going to plug it, I'm going to plug it for you. You put together a scholarship. You and your wife together put together a scholarship for minority students majoring in journalism. It is open to apply through the end of July, and they're awarding 2 scholarships themselves plus others that are being pledged to them. I don't know all the details, but I'm incredibly interested. I'm going to look into it myself. And Nick, I think it's just awesome that you're doing that and kind of paying forward the ability for others to have the opportunity to be a journalist. So hopefully we can get some more awesome football writers out there in the future.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yep, we're up to 6 people now. Pledges are still coming in. People are covering them. It's just always it's inspiring to see how people step up even in the worst of times. There's still good out there, and it's just nice to be able to see people come together and trying to do a little bit to make the world better. So, I'm just tweeting, man. Like I'm putting tweets out, and people are sending in their money. So, all the credit to everybody that's kind of come in behind us. So, yeah, we'll keep trying to raise money and try to create opportunities for some people, and it's the least we can do.
Thank you for organizing that. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our producer, Justin Stein, and our guest, Nick Underhill, I'm Matt Manicherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.